think we're there.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adoption of the agenda. It is recommended the Board of Education adopt the agenda as submitted. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. Motion carried. Consent agenda. It is recommended the Board of Education approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passed. October 2020 monthly financial reports.
Good evening. Just balances to report this month. 7.3 million in Fund 1, 501,000 in Fund 2, 9.2 million in Fund 3, and a negative 2.2 million in Fund 4. Everything's tracking as expected. No concerns to report. Any questions?
I would also add that obviously all districts have some COVID-related concerns with regard to the budget. I use this fund balance by month report to kind of be a little bit of a dashboard to see if there is an issue. Sometimes they can be hidden, but we're at 2.6 million up over where we were a year ago this time. And so that's an early indication that things aren't maybe as bad as they might be. We'll keep you posted. Again, it's early. It's probably even a little early to be cautiously optimistic, but I am feeling okay about what the numbers I'm seeing so far. So hopefully that's a good sign.
Thank you. Public hearings and presentations to the board. Pirate Pride.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening.
There we go.
I'm going to try this again. Good evening, everybody. I have a pleasure tonight to talk about my assistant director, who is also a very good friend of mine, who was recently chosen as the Missouri Council of Career and Technical Administrator of the Year, assistant director. Very well-deserved honor. Had a chance to celebrate him with a surprise it's been about 3 weeks ago. Actually got his wife to be up there. We had several folks from central office and our staff. Definitely something that is well-deserved. I had the pleasure of hiring Jeff as a teacher in 2008 as part of a team in Fort Osage. And so when I came here in 2011, it was on my mind if I wanted to bring somebody. There was several good people I worked with, but Jeff was right there. I said, if I can bring Jeff at some point into a role at Platte County, I want to do that. Fortunate enough to do that my fifth, I think it was the start of our fifth year. So this is his 6th year in Platte County, 6th year at Northland Career Center. And Jeff has done amazing things. If you work with Jeff, you just know he's collaborative, he's innovative, he lives all the 7 values in the school district. I think Jay would tell you if there's projects they work on together, he works on projects across the district with a lot of folks. We've had the privilege the last 3 years to be nominated and have been awarded the SRAB GA Bottoms, I think it's GA Bottoms, PACER Award. And none of that would have been possible without Jeff's leadership. He supported me in a lot of those initiatives. He supports our staff. We built a phenomenal staff with his help, so he's done a great job. I will take it one step further real quick. I know to not be too long, but we're navigating a pandemic at Northland University. And the reason we're able to do that is I have the gentleman to my right who is extremely innovative, extremely technically gifted, and we're doing a great job with his leadership through implementation of Canvas for Mind and some other tools, and just a really good instructional approach. And I would tell you, Jeff leads that approach with them and does a fantastic job. And so we're very fortunate in this district, in this building, in the Northland, to have Jeff Green on our team. Congratulations, Jeff, for your award.
How uncomfortable do you think Jeff was doing that? Congratulations, Jeff.
Congratulations. Thank you. Shiver Me Timbers, staff recognition.
Hello? Okay, for our Shiver Awards, it's not very often that we get to recognize district leadership. And the two that we're going to recognize is for visionary leadership. And I think this is how I would describe it. Everybody's heard the term other duties assigned. And that's kind of a scary term, right? And I would say what they're doing this year is other duties assigned on steroids. And super proud of them, but I also am super proud of this entire team. And that's why I wanted to speak first. I'm going to have Alicia introduce our two nominees, but if I could have all of the academic services team stand up. There's three here. Jen, stand up. And then we got Andy back there. Andy, don't hide. Give a wave. There we go. Just super proud of this team. They've been working tirelessly and on trying to serve our children and in many different ways. So I wanted to say that before I let Alicia introduce these two.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Do I get to take this? Leave it on. Can you hear me? It is. It's an honor to be back in front of you tonight. I feel like I haven't seen you in person since like last spring or whatever. It's nice to see you in person too. I'm Alicia Wilson. I'm the Director of Academic Services, and it is a true honor to get to work with both Shelley and Aaron on a daily basis. These two, like Dr. Brown said, have gone above and beyond in a normal year when we're not in a pandemic, but have done that twofold this year. We tasked both of these individuals with taking on a virtual school, a task in which we've never done before, really in education, let alone here in Platte County School District. These two have exceptional leadership. They have met the needs of our families and our staff, are listening to both stakeholders, and are navigating this experience gracefully. They work tirelessly, hours in and hours out, weekends, nights, holidays, in their sleep, who knows. But I'm exceptionally proud of them. It's an honor to be their friend and to be their colleague. So tonight we're honoring them for visionary leadership, and I appreciate both of you. You want to share just a little bit about your experience? Really quickly?
Hello. Well, first off, I'd like to thank Dr. Brown for even thinking this is something I could do. And it's been a challenge, but it's a great learning experience. And just the teachers that I am working with, they've held up their end of the bargain, so it's made it a lot easier. And the parents have been great, and the children. So it's a fun learning experience. Challenging.
I think we're set. I would just say that this has been a privilege and a joy to do this. I am blessed to have such a great team of teachers that support me as well, so it's a two-way street, and they are doing the hard work, and I just get the privilege of leading them. And working with them, supporting our families and our students as well, for those that we've made this a possibility to stay home and learn. And again, every day is different, and it's a challenge, and we're learning moment by moment, but I would like to chalk it up to the good work of the teachers that are really making an impact with our students and families.
All right, hey, well, you guys get some awards here. So here's your certificate. You got some pirate gear on there. There, here you show it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, probably can't put my arm around it. Keep my hands to myself.
Can you tell her we're smiling?
Thank you both very much. Public participation at board meetings. A person wishing to address an item on the agenda must complete a request form. Vicki, have we received forms?
We have received 3 request forms. So in order of speaking this evening, we have Ashley McCarty, Leona Baskerville, and Cassie Fetterman. So Ashley, and I will, if you'll give me just a moment, I will be able to start your speaker queue. Just a moment, I'm sorry. You can go ahead, Ashley.
Good evening. We are all students, parents, and administrators and board members learning what an online classroom looks like, how it's similar to and how it's different from an in-person classroom. Nearly a quarter into the school year, it is clear that there are advantages to the online classroom. The schedule flexibility has been amazing for our students and families, and clearly families, especially some of our district's most vulnerable, find peace of mind that they can avoid the health risks posed by face-to-face. As for the particulars of how it looks from an online teacher, I'll speak to my own experience, but it is echoed by my colleagues in the middle school. I teach ELA, and at Barry, I had between 90 and 100 students. In remote, there is 1 teacher for each content area. 1 teacher, 3 grade levels, and currently 212 students. Would you want your student to be one of 212? We have added 26 students to our roster since the beginning of the year. Currently, the 6 sections that I teach are enough to fill 9 sections of ELA. There are distinct differences to online learning. Communication is overwhelming, by which I mean both infinitely difficult to do correctly, don't overwhelm the families, but give them enough to keep them engaged and informed, and it's more time consuming. The time required to run an online classroom grows exponentially as student count increases and the amount of remote staff stays the same. The onboarding process of a single student to the virtual takes days of direct instruction by Ms. Baskerville to make sure that they are equipped for success in this environment. Due to the high student-to-teacher ratio, grading, small group help, and trying to meet the needs of all of our learners is quickly becoming unattainable. For some content area, there is little ability to reuse material as we would in the regular classroom, as it must be reevaluated, reworked, and reimagined for an online environment. Yesterday, I worked from 7:20 in the morning until 11:52 at night with no break. These were meetings, gradings, Zooms, meetings with my colleagues, meetings with parents and students. I work every day on the weekend, and I am always on call because that's what my students and my parents need from me, and that's why I'm here. I may be an English teacher, but I work every day and can tell you that with as many students as we have, there are only 10 minutes per student per week. Even working 15-hour days, that's not enough time to provide detailed and useful feedback, instruction, guidance, and meaningful communication consistently to every student. In every place that I find some time savings due to the online format, there's something necessary and valuable that eats that time and more. In short, we are burning the flame at both ends and we are overloaded. We are working long hours and still feel like we're not doing enough to be strong partners for our families. As our numbers increase, our efficacy as partners decreases, putting additional strain on students and families. And they deserve better. And better means more. Our students and families are not receiving the education that they are entitled to. They're not receiving the education that their face-to-face counterparts receive, and that is not for the lack of effort and passion and love we have for our students, but simply because of the lack of personnel and parameters for the flow of students into our program. While managing an organization is difficult, it's so important to get good, accurate information, and that's why I'm here. I'm not blaming, but I want to inform you. This board is preparing to vote for policy changes that are likely to increase the number of students in our online learning environment, and even further. Dr. Duff has done an amazing job of advocating our needs since the beginning. However, we have been given no concrete answer as to when we will see an increase in staff or clear outline parameters for the flow of new learners in the remote program, and we're potentially facing this en masse. Despite the full reopen plan going into effect on November 30th, wouldn't you, as a parent, move your child at the beginning of a quarter instead of in the middle of a quarter? That's far more disruptive to students. And the beginning of the new quarter is next month, a week from Monday. The fact that the remote program has had significant and constant influx of students during the hybrid is evidence that there will continue to be families less comfortable with a full face-to-face format and choose remote. I know that online learning in Platte County is seen as, and probably will be, a situation that isn't going to last beyond this year, but those of us involved in it cannot borrow against some more normal future to make the present better. We can only work in this moment, and right now these students and families need and deserve more support than is possible for us to provide. I ask the board to consider the current burden on students, parents, and yes, on teachers and our families in the online school as they consider these changes and ensure that there are sufficient staff parameters around students coming in and out of the program. We can do better. The remote learning potential is so vast. We can see it, but the solutions are simple. You have us. We are a strong, dedicated, and solution-focused remote team. Please help us continue the work that we are doing and give these kids the education that PCR-3 is known for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Leona? You may begin when you're ready. Perfect.
Hello, I'm back. I am definitely here with a solution-oriented and solution-focused conversation I want to have in regards to the full in-person movement expected for the middle school November 30th, and then the high school at the beginning of second semester. I'm not here to try and convince you not to vote yes. That's not really my purpose today. But before you vote yes, I do want to make sure that I give the board things to think about, questions to ask, and expectations of what a plan should entail. I have a unique position. I'm in a unique position this year. Normally I've come to you as a PCEA representative for one of our unions, for the NEA union. I've come to you as a parent, as a teacher. But this time I kind of take all of those roles plus the new role I was bestowed this year as the student and family support person for the remote middle school, which I love my job, period. I love my teaching job, but this job's been awesome too. But it does involve a lot of problem solving, logistical fixing, or logistical creation, a lot of process creation, a lot of collaboration between the high school staff, both middle school staffs, that's counselors, that's teachers, social workers, principals, office managers. I work with families very closely. We meet in person to help them onboard into the remote learning environment so that they're not experiencing technological gaps or just pretty much logistical gaps in going from in-person to remote. But I also work with parents on our Thursday table talks. We have an open session. I listen to parents. We hear concerns. We hear praise. We hear ideas. We hear solutions. I listen to students. I speak with them regularly. We communicate via email, through phone, and other methods. And then, of course, I listen to the members of our Platte County Education Association. So I have kind of a multifaceted perspective on what it takes, or some ideas of what it takes to put together a pretty comprehensive plan for making a move this big. We are all new to this, we know that. But in the several months that we've been in school, at this point, we've seen gaps in logistics that we need to address. And I want to make sure those things are addressed, or at least viewed and planned for when creating the plan to go back to full in person, because we do have a short 6 weeks to do it. And so it's really important that before you vote yes, you know what it all, at least what I can see, is being entailed in this plan. And I will email it to you once I'm done talking. So some questions to think of for students and families. How does a student on quarantine get their work? What is the expectation for work completion if the severity of their symptoms makes them unable to complete the assigned work? What does the district consider to be proper social distancing? What will class sizes be? Will Google Classroom still be the primary delivery method for assignments? What happens if my child has a cold or the flu? Will I need to provide a doctor's note prior to their return? Will the district be installing air filtration systems to clean the air when we're all back in the building? What will bus transportation look like now that there will be more kids on the bus with my student? If I'm transferring my student from remote learning to in-person, what is the process? For teachers, how will I space out the seats or desks in my classroom now that the class sizes will return to normal, which is anywhere from 15 students to 70, depending on the classroom and depending on the subject area and depending on the building? How will class size issues be mitigated? At the high school level, going in person means upwards of 30 students in a very small room, especially for the math classes. What expectations do we have for passing periods in terms of social distancing, mask wearing, etc.? How do I support students in quarantine? How do I know if they're quarantined or just absent? Why am I not quarantined when one of my students who sits in my classroom upwards of 30 consecutive minutes has tested positive for COVID? What expectations does the district have for me when I get a student transferring in from remote learning, grades, curriculum, etc.? Will the class schedules need to change to readjust to full in-person learning? What is the district's stance on us being docked pay or our use of our ALD days if we have to be pulled from class more than once due to contact tracing protocols? Why are we making this choice when we're on the cusp of cold and flu season? Will my classroom be equipped with an air purification system? Building questions to think about. How many drinking fountains with bottle fillers will be installed in each school? Currently, Berry School has one, and there will be 353 students going in November 30th. That's a problem. How will lunch lines work in the cafeteria that more kids are being served? How will we accommodate the larger student numbers during lunch and still maintain a safe eating environment? Band and choir classes. Now that the weather's changing, having those classes outside will cease to be an option. What procedures, parameters, and expectations will there be to ensure staff safety and student safety? Sorry, I'm going to hustle through. PE. How will large classes in PE, upwards of 70 sometimes, be considered when we're going into full in-person? Transportation, will the bus routes be added to ensure continued social distancing? Will we make students sit 3 to a seat on more populated bus routes? Cold, flu, or COVID, what will be the procedures for handling the different viruses? Contact tracing. Now that class sizes will increase, will the contact tracing procedures change? School building schedules, where the school building needs to have a different schedule, especially the high school once we start pushing in. Cleaning of buildings. With more students, will that affect the disinfecting of the rooms, the surfaces, and the buildings themselves? Will there be expectations for teachers to assist in cleaning or disinfecting classrooms? Migration of students to and from remote or in-person learning. What will we do to transfer the grades? What will we do to deal with the schedule changes? How will we make sure the onboarding process happens both ways? There's a lot to think about when putting together a plan, and a summary is not sufficient. And I'm sure I know there's tons more that I haven't said here, and I know that the district is coming up with plans. But please ask these questions, find the answers, make sure that we are covering every base, because this is a big decision, and we cannot go into it without asking the questions and really finding the answers, the logistical answers to all of these. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cassie?
It's on. Okay. Hi, I'm Cassie Fetterman. I feel like I should preface this by saying I don't like confrontation. I don't like to disagree with people. And that's what our entire world has been for the last 6 or 7 months. I actually was hesitant to come and speak tonight because I know a lot of parents who are so anxious for their kids to be back in school full time, and I don't want to upset them. That's my goal too, but I felt a responsibility to speak as a parent and really share some of the things that I'm hearing from other parents and really just how I feel. So let me read what I wrote, or I'll never get to my point. Okay. So I recognize that there is simply no perfect plan. I also recognize how hard the board, the administrators, and the teachers, and by the way, I have lots of friends who are doing online learning, and nobody has any complaints. I had no idea what the teachers were dealing with. Like, that's not okay. But it's appreciated, and it's obviously necessary. And I know you guys are working so hard to make education happen in our COVID world. There obviously are families who cannot risk exposure to the virus. Unfortunately, they have the option to learn safely online at home, and I'm grateful for that. For other situations, a face-to-face environment is better. I'm grateful to be able to send my elementary kids to school every day. Back in August, I wasn't really sure what it would look like or how my kids would handle wearing a mask all day and being limited to interacting only with the kids in their class. To my surprise, it's been great. My kids are happy and they've stayed healthy. Maybe it's the procedures and processes that are working. Maybe it's because we've just been really fortunate not to have that exposure. But there's a big difference between elementary and middle school and high school. One class is together all day in elementary. It limits the exposure if a student tests positive to that group of 20 kids or whatever it happens to be. For middle school and high school students, maintaining that 20-person bubble all day isn't possible. Although our kids are crossing paths and interacting with different groups in different classrooms throughout the day, the hybrid schedule has kept those groups small enough that a minimum distance of 6 feet, that just can't happen in elementary, that can be consistently kept in the middle school and high school. I would love for my middle schooler to go to school every day. We all want our days to look as normal as we thought they were 7 months ago. My concern is putting more people in the middle school building is going to lead to an increase in cases. Best case, it's going to lead to an increase in possibly unnecessary quarantines. Kids and families being forced to miss out on activities and have a major disruption to learning for 14 days because they were less than 6 feet away from someone for more than 15 minutes, despite the fact that they were wearing a mask. I really feel for the families who have needs that are better met when their student is in the building 5 days a week. I would hope that most of those cases can be handled on an individual basis. Our district has fantastic resources, and really I think the most caring teachers and administrators who I personally know will do anything to help. In the meantime, the circumstances that brought the district to make the decision that a hybrid environment was best haven't improved. And we're approaching a time of year where the viruses and illnesses that we're accustomed to fighting are at their worst. I don't know when will be ideal to have a full school building, but November 30th seems risky. I haven't shared any thoughts here that I know each member of the board hasn't already considered. I'm afraid you may hear too often and too much about what's wrong and what you need to fix or change. But the hybrid schedule is working. It's working to keep our kids 6 feet apart and safe. So no, it's not ideal. It's not what we want. But it's worth our struggle as parents, and I'm sorry, the struggle of the teachers, if we can sacrifice to keep our kids, keep our families, and ultimately keep our whole community safer as we try to navigate this life with COVID.
Thank you. Communications to the board. Written communications. At this time, any written communications received by board members may be presented. I believe there might have been a card passed around earlier. Any others? All right. New business. School board powers and duties. There are board policies and or procedures submitted for review. Does anyone have any questions or discussion on any of these?
This first read tonight.
Mm-hmm. enrollment update, enrollment summary.
Good evening, Board of Education. Would like to share with you an update on our September enrollment count. Every year we have an official count that gets submitted to the Department of Education every September, and that number is very important. It goes into a lot of our data and has some funding determinations and indicates where we are on any given year on enrollment. We had an anomaly this year. We actually decreased in enrollment. The other night at the long-range planning task force, I thought it was somewhere in the neighborhood of close to 25 years since that's happened. Thanks to Laura and Andy, they did a little research. It's been 22 years since the last time we had a decrease in enrollment. We decreased a little over 1.2%, 54 students. So currently our September enrollment total count is a little over 4,200 students. Certainly the impact of the pandemic, we believe, had a result of our enrollment this year. And in doing some of that analysis, what we found is that 43 students chose to be homeschooled that were former students. And that, on average, in a given year, we have about 25 of those students. Our kindergarten enrollment was up from last year a little bit, but down from the year prior, and well below what our enrollment projections were as well. So perfectly understandable. Parents that had a student that was ready to start kindergarten, there were several that probably held off, especially during a pandemic and during a year that was already going to have some other challenges. So we certainly feel like those had an impact on our enrollment. Also looking at our enrollment, we know that we have to look at other factors as it relates to our forecast in the future, which helps us make some decisions. Just to give you an indication of some other growth indicators, the residential new construction for the city of Kansas City within our school boundaries was over $50 million January through September of this year. The entire 2019 was just under 20 million. So we see still an uptick in residential construction occurring, and so we think that's certainly going to roll into future enrollment increases. We also know that our enrollment projections had us in 2022-23 have 2 elementary schools over 100% functional capacity. So that kind of supports what we're planning for with a spring of 2021 bond issue to provide some capacity relief. We're going to continue to monitor this. It's important to monitor this to know what the long-term impact is, but what you have in front of you is the enrollment data for September with a slight decrease from the previous years, and also you can see how that compares to our functional capacities of our buildings. With that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
The only thing I would add to Dr. Harris's report is that I've been talking with districts across the metropolitan area, and every district that I've talked to has either growing districts have remained flat or declined, but a 1% decline is pretty common across the metro. So I think it's safe to say with a 22-year history of growth and a blip on the radar screen, we can attribute this to a pandemic and feel pretty comfortable in saying that. So you've heard me say this before, but the pandemic should not keep us or prevent us from planning for the future, and we don't intend on allowing it to do so. Having said that, we will continue to monitor and make sure that we have a good handle on what our enrollment trends are doing. Is my microphone on? Did you hear me? I'll just speak louder. So what I said is across the metro, districts are seeing about a 1% decline or a flat, no growth. And so we believe this is COVID related, and it won't impede our plans to look to the future as far as managing growth, especially since we've had 22 years of straight growth leading up to this year. So continue to monitor to determine if there is any issue in terms of growth. But as Dr. Harris said, our new construction permits on the residential side continue to be strong.
Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Harris.
Thank you.
Survey information review from Patron Insight.
Good evening, everyone. Let me get organized here a little bit, because if I don't, you'll fog up on me, and I don't want that. So, it's very nice to be here with you this evening. Oh, that's funny loud. It's very nice to be here with you this evening. I'm Ken DeSeekart from Patron Insight, and I want to go over some very encouraging research results that we completed late last month, early this month, depending on the particular study that we're talking about here. Let's talk for a minute, and stop me along the way, but let's talk first about the telephone study, and just a little housekeeping first. We did interview 400 heads of household, male or female, registered voters who know they live in the district. And these were landlines and cell phones at random. And we divided it up with counsel from the district based on the population trends north and south of KCI. In the past, we had done 300 north and 100 south, and we tweaked that a little bit this year, as you saw in the report. Well, we had three primary goals. The first was to evaluate perception of the district's performance in a host of different areas. The second was to ask people to review the ideas that were being considered for a potential ballot issue, and I use the generic ballot issue as opposed to bond or levy because it's easy to understand for everyone. And then finding out, excuse me, where typical residents get information about the school district. And remember, we're talking about a cross-section of folks, so this is not parents exclusively. The online survey is parents exclusively, with less than 1% who snuck in there and weren't parents of current students. To begin with the evaluation portion, and you're familiar with this from past surveys that we've done, but we ask people to grade a host of different areas of the district. And if you look at page 14 in your report, this is the page that sort of summarizes all those grades. You'll see all the grades, all the A's and B's and C's and so on the previous pages, but that's a little hard sometimes to get your arms around and understand, well, we seem to have more B's here and more A's here, what does it all mean? So we use a very simple weighted scale. You can't get a 5, which would be an A, because everybody would have to say 5. And I've been doing this since 1992, and that hasn't happened yet. So no shame in not being the first district to get a pure 5. We look at how much above and below a 4 a score is, because 4 is a B. Now, when you take into account the margin of error, I promise not to get too nerdy here, but when you take into account the margin of error, a score as low as 3.80 is still, statistically speaking, a B. So if you look down the list on 14, you will see that 13 out of 18 graded factors, plus the district's overall performance, got a B. And that is above average for all the districts that we work with. We don't always do 18, that's a district decision. But from a percentage standpoint of B's versus slightly below a B, which is what you were when there was nothing that was cataclysmic in the 5 that weren't a B. This is above average. So kudos to you for the hard work there. You'll see that we've highlighted the areas that had a greater than 5%, which is the margin of error, increase in scores from way back in 2014, which is the last time we did this, and those that had a greater than 5% decrease. Remember, 6 years is a long time. You've had a lot of water under the bridge since then. So don't get too concerned, don't get too excited about the ones that are greater than 5% up, but don't get too concerned about the ones that are down as well. These are good scores, and most of them are pretty close to each other. in terms of from 6 years ago. Next section was open-ended questions on strengths and areas needing improvement in the district, and that starts on 17. And you will see what I always like to see, and that's teachers in the #1 position. Remember, this is open-ended. We didn't just read them a list and have them say, which one of these are strengths? They had to come up with it on their own. So 107 people, more than 25% came up with teachers on their own, followed by quality education, and strong curriculum, quality facilities, other, which is the ones that are sort of one-off, and those are listed below, and don't know, and then we kind of trail off from there. But having teachers in education means that the average resident, and if you see the demographics in the back, you'll see a little less than 1/3 of these folks were current parents. So they don't have a whole lot of day-to-day interaction with how well you're doing. And yet, 107 total said teachers, and 81 said quality education and strong curriculum. And I will repeat, it's in the report, but I'll repeat, don't get too excited by the positive one-off comments or too worried about the need to improve one-off comments, because if they were indicative of a trend, they would be in enough quantity to be in that chart. But we don't want to keep anything from you at all. Question 25, page 20 is the where can we improve? And this might sound strange, but having don't know in the top position is really good, because it says people aren't sitting around going, oh, I know exactly where they can improve. 138%, 138 said don't know, so that's about 35% if I recall the math. Manage budget and money better. We could just print pages that said that for this question for every district that we work with. It's just a very common comment on this question. But when you take the next one down, which is nothing, the district is doing fine as it is, you will see where almost half of the people either couldn't come up with something or said, you're doing great right now. That is an echo of those great grades, I think. I'm going to turn to the ideas being considered for a potential bond issue. We read descriptions of each of these ideas, and they were fact-based descriptions. There's no selling language in here. No, our very old high school needs to be renovated. No, we didn't do that. It was just very factual, because the communication that comes from this information as you go out and prepare an informational campaign, and a committee prepares a promotional campaign, has to be based on the facts and what people think about the facts. After each description was read, we said, if this was included in a bond issue, would you be more likely to vote in favor, against, or would it make no difference to you? The easy way to look at this is on page 27, where all of the ideas are presented there with the vote in favor and vote against. And you can see that security, which is always a home run, was in this case as well, with 76% more likely to vote in favor. 63% said they would be more likely to vote in favor if you had that new middle school in the southern part of the district. And I would point you to just to the right of that, which is the breakdown by people who live north of KCI and south of KCI. Now, it's probably to be expected that south of KCI would be really supportive of this, and they are, but 55% still, north of KCI, still said, yeah, I would be in favor of a bond issue that included that. So that's encouraging. The Berry and Pathfinder renovations were 57%. And the rebuilding of PCHS, a lot more detail on the question, but was 51%. And those two, to me, I'm sure we all like them to be a little bit higher. They're much more positive than negative. You'll see those negative scores. And the other folks who either don't know or wouldn't make any difference to me. Those are complicated things to describe. And I think that is what I see in these two questions, There's not, if there had been strong negatives, I'd be saying something different. But the positives are good, but it also says, I need to have this explained to me. How can kids go to this school while renovation's underway? And that's part of the communication challenges going forward. But everybody's over 50%, and that's encouraging. So what about a level of support? We asked them first, you've heard the ideas, now if the election were held today, how would you likely vote? And because it's a hypothetical, we don't do yes or no, we do strongly favor, oppose, or strongly oppose. And then we throw in a few in case the interviewers make a judgment that someone was saying, well, I'd probably be in support. We have a lean favor category in that. You can see on question 30, page 29, if you put strongly favor and favor together, we're at 68%. Now, that's well clear of the margin of error, even in the state of Missouri, where we have more challenges with the 4/7. So that's very encouraging. When we go to the factor explained in the next question that it will not require a tax increase, we jump up to 76%, which is greater than a 5% difference, which means that message is something that the district will need to reinforce over and over again, because it means something to people. You know, they like the ideas, but when they hear that it's these ideas and there's no tax increase, they get even more enthusiastic about it. The last one, the last substantive section on the telephone survey, it has to do with where do you get your information about the school district. And that is on question 33. The percentages shown here are people who said that it's a frequent source of school district information for me. We've had high scores for friends and neighbors before, but 93% is really high. And that really reinforces that people talk about the school district. Because remember, slightly less than a third of the people that we interviewed are current student families. So even people with no day-to-day experience or service from the school district are talking to their neighbors about it. Newsletter, kudos on the newsletter for 51%. That's really strong to get the score over 50%. The Black County Citizen and teachers, 40% is kind of our cutoff between these are the ones you really need to focus on. But it does say teachers need to be kept informed all the time because they are seen as a source of information, even though not everybody here is a parent. And then you good folks, including administration on stage and in the audience, almost made that 40%. So your words are very much listened to when it comes to school district business. The rest of the questions are demographics, and I won't go through those, but it was pretty good breakdown of folks by age and how long they've lived in the district. Pretty representative breakdown, I should say. So a quick comment here or two on the online survey, and then obviously I'll take questions, but about the same time that we were doing the telephone survey, we made an online survey available to parents because we really wanted to hear from them because they were going to be very much affected by that second middle school and by the variant Pathfinder changes, pretty much everything here. And so we gave them an opportunity to participate online, knowing that not everyone would be called, not everyone would have the chance because it was at random. And another kudos to the communication team here because we had 985 people participate. And in a district your size, to get more than 500 really speaks to the fact that there was a lot of encouraging going on about it. If you have not done this, please do so because we don't know, and the district representatives don't know who has and hasn't. So that's sort of tricky messaging to say, if you have, thank you. If you haven't, we really want to hear from you and cross your fingers that they do. I'm working with a really small district right now, well, East Lynn, which is sort of near Harrisonville, and we're doing a little online study, and they have 208 students. They're a K-8 district, and we're struggling to get past 59 right now. So 59, and it's not parents, it's everybody, it's community too. So that even reinforces how good 985 is. If you look in the report, sort of an overall comment. The column on the left is the telephone survey column, because that's the statistically reliable one. I want you to concentrate on that. And that's the order, that's the one that's in rank order. And so if it looks like the online results are flopping all over the place, that's why. Because we want to reinforce the fact that the online or the phone survey is the reliable one. And as you go through this, and I'm sure you noticed it, we have a lot of areas, almost every area, it's pretty similar to what we got on the phone survey. And remember, this is 99% of these folks were parents. We only send it to parents, but a few others, snuck in there, and that's fine. We want to hear from as many people as possible. But yes, I mean, if something with one was 51 on the phone survey, it was 58 on this one. So very similar, which means you got some congruence, I guess would be the word, of opinions there. So I won't go through this in detail because I know you've got a long agenda. If you're a typical school board on an October evening, I'm sure you've got a lot to cover. But I will be happy to answer any questions.
The amount of parents that you had in the phone survey, do you know if that's reflective of the overall population?
Is that representative of the overall? I'm going to have to turn to the district folks about that. We usually get 1/3 parents, current parents, 1/3 past parents, and 1/3 never parents. And that tends to be fairly representative. But Dr. Wright?
Is this on? Good?
Yeah.
All right. The only thing I'll add to that is that, basically we had Andy look in our student database and break our population down, south of KCI and north of KCI, and then had those proportions reflected in that 400 so that we can make sure that the responses we get from our 400 patrons are statistically valid in terms of predicting our outcomes on election day.
Geography is the most important in terms of accuracy, because if you looked at it and you said, why are there so many people south when so many people live north? We need to be accurate on that, and then kind of sort of let the chips fall in terms of parent status and things like that.
Have you done any recent polling of comparable projects in comparable districts, and how would their results compare?
Okay, this is my commercial. No, yes, we have. We did we did research in Lee Summit down south. We're about to do some research in St. Joe, but we did research in Lee Summit prior to their fielding of the successful ballot issues that they had. Wentzville would be closer to you, not geographically, but size-wise. And we did research with them for no tax increase bond issue and a levy increase that both said they would pass, which always causes me pause, and they did within the 5%. So, yeah, I think you're looking at possibly April, is that correct? Or are we looking at next November? Possibly April?
April.
Okay. Well, that makes this even more confident that in these numbers, because you're not stretching it out a year from the time we did the research, and heck, none of us know what the pandemic's going to be like and all that. But if we're close, time-wise, yeah, I think that's good.
Wasn't that Wentzville bond issue the largest in state history, or was that a different district?
No, it was, which of course no superintendent wants to have, as a talking point. It's the largest. Every time there's a story, I'm sure, in the media, like it's the largest one. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you. I'll put on my walking billboard here for the company. You guys have all the nice swag. I have to get some too. Thanks, Ken. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Bank depository services. You want to speak on that? No.
Good evening again. Back in September, we issued a request for proposal for banking depository services in accordance with board policy DG. This policy says we can bid this out annually, or we can enter into a contract agreement anywhere from 1 to 5 years. So our current agreement we have expires the end of October, so obviously it's time we needed to bid this service. We received 2 sealed bids, which are submitted for your review. Dr. Reich and I opened those and scored them based on the rubric, which is also submitted for your review. Based on the final scores, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the proposal from Wells Bank for depository services as submitted. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? It is recommended the Board of Education approve the proposal from Wells Bank for bank depository services as submitted. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Please vote. Motion passed. Curriculum and instruction, quality, continuous improvement, and strategic planning key process update. Dr. Brown?
Yes, good evening. We're going to try to do this without me having a clicker here. So I'll just kind of go like that. Andy, David. This update is kind of serves as we do it annually, and it kind of serves as a board orientation for the new board members. Some things that you'll you'll know what to expect at the board meetings when we give our updates, because they will all be very similar. And for our board members that have been on for a while, just kind of a refresher for you. It all starts with this document up here, which is our vision, mission, and values. And this really kind of serves as our direction. So we will refer to this every Thursday evening that we meet. If we're doing our jobs right, we refer to it every day and make sure that any decisions that we're making, this document should give us a direction to do those. One little caveat to this document is that, especially when you kind of look at the principles of learning, even the values for that matter, some of those can be up for interpretation, right? But they still, they also speak to some good conversation and some things that kind of help us in our improvement efforts. So, you know, when you look at the mission statement and the vision, it's pretty clear. But those principles of learning, those are challenging, and those are things that we use in our meetings and whatnot as we make decisions. This, I guess you guys don't really know what's up there. This is actually page 3 of the PowerPoint, and this serves as our work system. And so everything on this work system is something that each one of these has a strategic plan. And so each of these will provide you an update given a certain month. There will be a schedule that I'll show you here in a second. And each of these strategic plans will be updated to you. We'll also give kind of reports on things that are within these strategic plans. And so this is kind of our, what I like to call our vehicle that drives us. So we have our direction, and this is our vehicle, and then we have the engine that drives us. So each, you can go ahead and flip it there, David. Each of these strategic plans follows the same format. So this is called what we call our quality continuous improvement framework. And so, for example, when we give our, let's just take instruction, curriculum, professional development. The first category is leadership, and that basically says, why do we have instruction? Why do we need plans for that? Why do we have curriculum? Why do we have to assess kids? So your leadership answers those questions on the why we even have what we have. It also provides the who answers the questions. So there's different teams in those. So that's kind of that category. The customer focus is exactly what it says. Who are the people that we are most impacted by instruction, curriculum, and assessment? What are our goals for those? That would be in strategic planning. Does our workforce have what they need in order to achieve those goals? What are our processes? And we share many processes with you all. How are we going to measure those? And then we'll always provide you with results. So it doesn't matter what strategic plan it is. Dr. Harris will do facilities and operations, follows the same format. Dr. Butel will do tiered support, same format. The reason why we do that is that's the science behind improvement. And the science will tell you if really what you're doing to get the results that you want are actually working. If we did different things for different key processes, we really wouldn't know what's working and what's not working. So this helps us. This is our what we call our engine. Teachers do the same thing. This is the engine that they use in the classroom. So it's aligned to the one that we use. Doesn't matter if you're a kindergarten teacher, doesn't matter if you're a AP chemistry teacher. You follow the same format. Why do we exist? What do our kids and what do our parents need? What are the goals of the classroom? What are the individual goals of the students? How am I going to engage the students to achieve those goals? What processes do we need in our class to achieve those goals? What measures are we going to use, and when are we going to look at our results? Same thing in every classroom. So from the boardroom to the classroom, this is what we use. David, you could probably just kind of click through all those because they can see it on their computer. There you go. So why do we do this? These are all the reasons why that we use quality continuous improvement in our district. We're about 10 years in using this. It has changed a little, not much. And really what it does is it just kind of helps us stay grounded in what we're doing. And it helps you guys, every board meeting, you'll come to know what to expect with that strategic plan update. It's gonna look the same thing, where there won't be any surprises relative to the presentation. And they'll all do the same. You can just go ahead and go to the next slide, Dave. My job is really to make sure that we're all aligned. So if you're on, I don't know, I think that's number 7. That's actually a snapshot of a spreadsheet that I use. And on this spreadsheet, I track where everybody is on their strategic plan. So every key process, I track that on there. Every building also has a strategic plan. I track that. And so I will meet with all our building administrators to make sure that they're on track with their we call them their building improvement plans. And then as a support for Dr. Reich with cabinet, I help him make sure that we use that time to bring everybody together so that we're all aligned and try to be on the same page. And we do that through this framework. So that kind of helps me keep him informed of where we're at for all of our key processes and hopefully makes his job a little easier. So how can the board participate? How can you help us keep getting better? And these are just kind of some bullet points. I'm sure you guys can think of some on your own as well. But these are just some things that I think are real important as you're out in the community. Being ambassadors for the vision, mission, and values is a huge help for us. Encouraging others to participate in the process. Our district relies on stakeholder feedback, and there's challenges to that, because we get a lot of feedback, and being able to process it and use it is challenging, but it's much needed. So through our focus groups, our surveys, all of those things, they're really important to us. The more you can encourage people to participate in those events, super beneficial, super beneficial. The more people that participate, the better for us. Understand oh, if you could go back, David, I don't know if I have all those memorized. Understand the purpose of and the significance of the framework, being able to explain that as best you can is also a help. Asking questions when we, at the board meetings, you'll know exactly what presentations you're gonna get, and asking those questions are super helpful. And then the last one is making requests. So like if you hear things, I'll make some stuff up here, like leader in me at the elementary level. You might hear that we're doing that at the elementary schools. And that interests you and you want to learn more about that, if you just email me or give me a buzz and say, hey, I think the board would really like to hear more about that. We do a lot with ACT improvement. If you'd like specifics on that, Character Strong is a new program that we're using in our middle schools. You might have heard about that. Super cool. And so any requests that you guys would like to make on anything that we're doing that are more specific and maybe not, maybe wouldn't be in the strategic plan update, feel free to do that. This is the calendar that we're going to use for you on the updates. So we're actually a little behind because of our pandemic world. I was supposed to actually give this to you in August, and we're in October. Where tonight we will have the comprehensive strategic plan, and then you guys can vote on that next month. And then you'll just kind of see the list going down. Each month will be a strategic plan update. In the middle, where it says program evaluations, Dr. Butel and I met today, and we're gonna space those out maybe a little differently this year. If you notice, there's a lot in December, which is very hard on her, and it's also hard on you, because you have to read all the program evaluations. And so what we're gonna do is kind of space those out, and I'll work with Vicki on the changes that Dr. Butel and I are suggesting to do, and it'll just be easier on everybody. You'll get all the program evaluations, we'll just space them out a bit. Submitted for your review is our CSIP for 2021. Full disclosure, we do a SWOT analysis every year, and we had all kinds of big plans this year to maybe look at some things that we were talking about for like college and career readiness, and we had some things that we were going to look at for our grading practices and whatnot, and we put those on hold because we have more pressing things that we need to focus on to make sure our kids are okay. So really, besides two things on the CSIP that I bring your attention to, the two focus areas that you will hear a lot about this year is virtual learning, not just for our remote learners, but also for our in-person learners. So that's something that we will have a platform. Even if you have an in-person learner at home, they will have a virtual platform that will be working as well. So that's a focus, helping our staff and our students navigate through that and be prepared for that. And then the second focus area that is that we are going to continue on, that is really important work, is our work with diversity. And that is noted on that second page of the CSIP as well. That was not on there last year. And so that work is led by Dr. Butel, and that is something that we are going to continue even through all of our challenges that we have, is that work. So those are pretty much the two. Other than those two, we're going to go back to our core. It doesn't matter if you're a remote learner, it doesn't matter if you're an in-person learner. We want you to be successful, and we're going to try to provide you with the best meaningful experiences possible, and we want you to be safe, and we want you to be cared for. And that's really our focus, our main focus for our children this year, as that's what we need right now. So we're going back to our core with the exception of those two huge things that I told you about. I also submitted for your review. If you want to do this, you can print off the documents. I put them on your presentation as reference documents. And on the reference documents, it has our strategic plan process that we use. It also has all of the questions. I should say most of the questions, because we don't use all of the questions every time on the strategic plan. But those are questions that we answer in each category. And so if we don't answer a question that, these would be good for you, like, oh, I'm going to dig deeper into this. But these are the questions that we kind of base those strategic plans off of. So I just kind of, there's more than that, but I put the important ones down just as a reference document for you, which may help, may not, but if you have those. Be more than happy to take any questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
You covered that altogether, didn't you?
Yeah,
I thought you just advanced and we didn't. He worked ahead.
Yeah, I was foreshadowing. Thank you.
Trying to keep up, thank you,
Unfinished business, school reopening plan update.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to lay out the overarching overview of our plans for shifting to a more in-person learning modality. And going to go over the high-level information. Dr. Butel is going to help me with one slide. And then we're going to open it up for questions for the board. Just as Leona mentioned, questions are welcome, and there are endless logistical considerations in making this shift, many of which we've already been working on and considering, but there's still a lot of information and detail that has to be gone through. We have to do this in partnership with our staff members who are on the front line. We have to resolve staffing conflicts. We're going to have to resolve the lack of personnel, and so we're going to work through those issues, and the only way we do that is by doing it together. So let me go overview. Next slide, please. So our plan to return full in person with a virtual option. We will continue to have a virtual option for those families that feel most comfortable in that environment. What we would see with regard to virtual migration, our speculation is that there would be some that would return and then some that would want to go to virtual. But either way, we need to monitor that declaration period, try to have an idea of what conflicts that arises and brings to us, and then work through those challenges. So we are recommending that middle school return first on 11/30, which is the day after Thanksgiving break. It's a phased plan because logistically we simply can't handle bringing 6 through 12 back at the same time. The high school shift is much more considerable in terms of the complications and having several classes that are semester long, and the logistical considerations around the high school, we need more time. And it's also a prudent approach that the health department approves of in terms of phasing the return of our students. So again, November 30th, 6 through 8 will return, and we will have a declaration period via e-form by October 23rd. High school plans are to bring those kiddos back full in person January 11th, which is the first day of the second semester. And then we would have a declaration for those families as well, as far as their choice, virtual or in person, by November 13th. And that would not just be for high school, but for all of our students, correct? Yep. So let me get into a little bit of rationale here. But first of all, we feel like this approach is to the best of our ability, balancing the needs of our community. We have people that we heard from tonight that have that are raising concerns, but also offering their suggestions, and we welcome that. We know that we have some students that are doing just fine in the hybrid, if not thriving in some cases. But we also know that we have families that are struggling. And we also know that we have students that are dealing with mental health issues in our community that we're not able to support as well. We know that we have students that are in food unstable environments when they're not with us, that is worsened. We know that we have kids that are being abused and we're not seeing them as much as we would like to. And so there's lots of things to consider, and our plan is intended to balance the needs of our entire community. So I've said from, I believe, a video message to staff and parents as early as July that it's our intent to go back full in person as long as our health department officials tell us that we can do so safely. And so we have been working with our health department, the 4 county superintendents, Tri-County Mental Health, Children's Mercy, and of course, Mary Jo and Dan with the health department. And I want to credit our health department in that they have looked at this consideration in a collaborative way. So, you know, they want to hear from the county superintendents with regard to their considerations. They're not just telling us what to do, they're listening to us, and then they do have the authority to tell us what to do, but they want to hear from us. And so we worked with them on developing what, you know, we've all seen different examples of in the media and across our health departments and school districts. We started working on gating criteria, so we had some way to determine where we would go in terms of our learning modalities. And as we got into that work, we realized that the gating criteria that has been produced to this point is somewhat flawed in that, A, the data that has been used primarily is coming from a county testing program that is inadequate. And so because we're not funding our testing program here in this county very well, we're only testing or primarily testing sick people, and that's producing higher positivity rates. So we found the data as not as useful as we would like it to be in terms of making gating decisions or shifting between modalities. Secondly, the decision matrix in the gating criteria that we had seen across other health departments didn't really give consideration to the operational concerns of shifting between learning modalities. And the teachers that spoke tonight, they're correct. There are a lot of logistical considerations here, and we can't pivot overnight. And the gating criteria that has been produced would suggest that that's what we would do. So to the health department's credit, again, they understand that operationally we can't just pivot, you know, within a week. And then to the points I made earlier, we recognize that the health of our community cannot just be measured by our positivity rates with regard to COVID-19. There are other community health factors that have to come into consideration when we determine the health and well-being of our entire community. And so where this conversation led is to the production of a document by the health department that is that provides indicators for dynamic school decision making. So they're recognizing that this isn't a hard decision matrix, but we are looking at several data points and both qualitative and quantitative, and working in collaboration with the health department to make determinations of what learning modality we would go into. And so that led to a pathway that would allow us to submit our mitigation strategies to the health department and seeking their approval. In other words, getting the health department to agree that our plan is something that they can feel comfortable with in terms of safety and the health of our students and staff. And so that is why we intend to move in that direction. Go ahead and advance. Okay, just to give you an idea of numbers here, I won't read these to you, but we basically are breaking it down by how many kids we have in person and then how many kids we have in the remote setting, just to give you an idea. Again, we think there could be some shifting between remote and in person and vice versa. We won't know until we have a declaration period. But as you can see, if our numbers remain somewhat static, or even if our online, our virtual kids increase, which yes, would have to come with considerations for additional staffing, and you know, those are things that we're going to have to work on both online and in person to resolve conflicts. But obviously, with the remote option, even full in person is significantly reducing the number of kids that we have in our building. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we can social distance everywhere in our secondary buildings. We are not doing that now in our elementary buildings, but we will be social distancing to the greatest extent possible, and that is what we will be submitting to our health department. Face coverings, I'm not going to get into too much detail here because I've got people in the front row there that can help me and over at the podium. But you know, face coverings is something that's non-negotiable when we can't social distance. So that's part of our safe return. So those are the numbers that we have, and because we do have virtual learners, it does give us greater ability than everybody being back in the building to accomplish some semblance of social distancing. So as we move forward, we will continue, even after we make this shift, we will continue to monitor our data with the county health department and the 4 county superintendents. And we'll be looking at positive case numbers, quarantine numbers, exposure. And I want to go back, the positive case numbers, again, are somewhat limiting until we have a more robust testing program in this county. But we will still look at that data. It's important for us to keep an eye on that. We need to look at attendance rates for staff and students. As you know, Dr. Archer with the Kansas City Health Department, he's moved to a point in terms of his recommendations for school learning modalities consideration is, do you have enough employees to service your students? And so we have to continue to look at those numbers and determine whether or not we're able to make that happen. Substitute fill rate will be data that we look at with the county health department. You know, how many teaching sub positions we have that go unfilled. Student academic performance has to be a consideration. And while we are definitely having some kids be successful in our remote learning, along with our hybrid, we have some kids that are struggling as well. We have a higher DNF rate this year than we have in years past, and that's concerning to us, and that has to be part of our consideration as well. And then also the dynamic, the indicators for dynamic school decision making, or the gating considerations with the health department, we have to consider those data points as well. So I wouldn't say that any one of these things is more important than the other, but that we look at them holistically and use that information and data to form our decisions with regard to what modality of learning we're shifting to. Okay, so some key considerations, and this is perhaps a vast oversimplification, but obviously we've got a plan for students that are changing learning modes, classroom staffing, schedule changes. I don't know that I would even say if necessary, they most certainly will be necessary. Maybe not across all corners of the district, but there will be some considerations there. And then we've got to do a good job of reinforcing our messaging to our parents with regard to quarantining and why we do what we do and what guidance we're using and how that relates to face coverings, et cetera. And so I'm going to kick it over to the next slide and let Dr. Butel talk a little bit more about our when we have a positive case and our quarantine practices.
Hi, nice to see you. I have no gifts this time, sorry, just information. Early on, as a leadership team, we set some parameters around what we would do and what we would not do with relationship to positive cases within our building. It was really important as we reflected on what our families needed in terms of communication, what our students needed in terms of consistency, how we would react. And our parameters are before you, what we will do and what we won't do. These were basically our non-negotiables. As a part of this, as part of my oversight with our health services team, it was really important that we would be as informed as we could possibly be. I completed the Johns Hopkins contact tracing course. I got 100% on my final, thank you very much. And almost immediately had to start using my skills. I have several nurses supporting me that have taken the course independently, but all of our nurses have been through the course as of Monday in terms of contact tracing. At our building level, the purpose of that is so that they are knowledgeable, not that they step out of their assistance role in health services in the building. At the district level, they're taking on that contact tracing piece. But instead, so they could be more informative to parents and more helpful in taking questions. We wanted to maintain the trusting relationship, the healthy relationship between the school nurse being somebody who hears the concerns of parents and all of the what ifs, with the problem solving happening outside of that. Not that we don't partner together, we do 3 times a week now, we're meeting, but that we would take the difficulty of asking families to quarantine, coaching through isolation, and those sorts of things at the district level. When it comes to contact tracing, we follow several tenets, the first being social distancing. If students can't be more than 6 feet apart for 15-minute increments, we really have to look at that if we have a positive case in the building. Our administrators have been amazing, our teachers have been incredibly amazing with maintaining static seating charts. So having consistency of where students are in your classroom is key to contact tracing. We make sure that we know exactly where students are. We have pictures and seating charts and attendance records before we ever engage staff on walk me through what this day looked like, or these several days looked like, while this student was either pre-symptomatic, pre a positive test, or symptomatic in our buildings. We walk through a process first on paper, and then we validate that process or invalidate that process, those thinkings with our staff, with our administrators. Were you working through, here are where all of our students are, but we were working on a lab, so we were all at one table. How long did the lab take? Talk to me a little bit about where people were standing. I would say it's not a science, it's an application of science as we go through this problem solving piece. We also have spent a lot of time watching bus tape, timing bus routes, recess tape, that's one of my personal favorites, looking at lunchroom configurations and those sorts of things as we talk about how close kids are to a student who's positive. As Dr. Reich said, the notion of quarantine is an unfortunate byproduct of in-person learning. And it's one of our strategies to help continue to keep our students and our families safe, as well as our staff. We have to remember that 3-pronged approach. So as we go through the process, we try to make sure that we are applying the tenets of social distancing in a conservative manner. One of our things is we will not immediately close buildings or classrooms. We try not to be reactive. We try to make sure we have all of our information in front of us before we start phone calls home. One of the questions that I'll go ahead and answer now is how folks are notified. We have a system with our nurses that once we've determined a student is out based on a quarantine, which means they've been exposed, or an isolation, which means they're a positive case or a presumed positive case, we do notify staff that a student will be out until a certain date. We don't say if they're positive or if they're just quarantined, because that's not our health story to tell, and that's a HIPAA violation. So we are very careful with that, but we do share that information that students are out for a set period of time. I will say that based on how the virus travels, that time can change. So it may be that you're eligible to return next Friday, but something happens or you become ill, and then we have to change those dates. So it is kind of an evolving, moving target, and also a lot of math, not my favorite. We try really hard to provide high quality consultation to our families and information. What we've discovered with our phone calls home, asking families to quarantine, that we're basically up to what we call in our little office area a 3-touch process.
the initial touch, you need to quarantine, shock from the family, a follow-up with a lot of questions, and then another follow-up with a bunch of what ifs. And we're fine with that because we feel like that's where our families are and that's what they need. But a lot of people have my cell phone number right now. So that's really how we're approaching this. After we're done with our process, I collaborate with Laura on letting her know that we've had a positive case in one of our buildings, or I collaborate with Mr. Knoller. And then after the contact tracing piece is finished, we notify the school family community that there's been a positive in the building and the last day of attendance of that positive. So that's how we handle a positive in the building.
So, some people would say that Dr. Betel is too good at contact tracing. Some people would say that.
I haven't heard that.
No. One thing I want to point out, in addition to what Dr. Betel's presented, is even if we weren't being proactive in doing the contact tracing, the health department at some point would follow and do their contact tracing. They just don't have the resources to be able to do it expeditious enough for us. By us being proactive, we're minimizing the potential exposure. So even though we're delivering some news that folks don't want to hear, it would have been delivered more than likely from somebody else just a few days later, and we would have had to deliver it more than likely to more people. So,
and regardless, we would have still had to do the legwork because they can't see inside our walls and have the same types of conversations that we've been able to have. The other piece when it comes to that is our data sheets that we keep, our spreadsheets that we keep for students and for staff. Erin Sanders, the epidemiologist at Platte County Health Department, I work very, very closely with her. She's amazing. She is in those sheets every day. I can see her. I can see where she's looking. And she's provided a lot of really great feedback. We've had a lot of collaboration on some pretty difficult cases, on timelines. And sometimes it feels a little bit like pitting mom against dad sort of situation. But we've really been able to come together and make sure that as best we can, we're giving families correct information and supportive information.
okay, thank you. Advance that slide. So here's a review of the timeline. Again, I won't read it to you, but obviously we're at the first bullet point here tonight. We plan to, if approved tonight by the board, we will submit our plan to the health department tomorrow, and then we will follow accordingly with our return. Again, as you know, what's not reflected in this timeline is the countless hours of laborious work that the people in the audience will put in, including our teachers. We have lots of work to do to make this happen. And you know, while I think we would all like at least a couple more weeks to make some of these things happen, we feel like this timeline is prudent and balances the desires of the community with our ability to make this this pivot. So, so with that, I will open it up for questions.
So we submit this assuming we were to approve it, we would submit it to the Platte County Health Department. What is the process on their end from there?
So the Platte County Health Department board has given Dan and Mary Jo the authorization to approve or deny the request. And I would expect to, just based on what I've seen, you're aware that there was an allowance for the smaller school districts to submit a request to attend full in person, and I think both of them heard back within a day or two. So I think the process we could hear as early as early next week from the health department. So we would have that relatively soon, and so that would come from Mary Jo and Dan.
So that approval comes from Mary Jo, not the entire health board.
No, they gave Mary Jo the authorization to make that approval.
Just to be clear, the students would come back on the 4th. They would work a week on the old schedule, the old semester, finish that semester. They come back the following weekend on the 11th, or the week Monday after that weekend, and they would be on the full in person.
Yes, so the 4th, we would return to school on the 4th with A students, and then on the 5th with B, and we will continue in our hybrid until the end of that week. and then we will shift to a new semester, which will be in all likelihood just about a completely new master schedule on the 11th, and that would start second semester.
So it's possible a student may have the same class, maybe a different teacher, because we have to accommodate all the class size increase.
Yes, there will be class sizes that will be too large that we're going to have to resolve. There will be probably the need for additional staff if we're able to find them. There may be some creative ways that we solve some of these issues. We have paid teachers to use their prep for teaching a class at times when we get into conflicts that we're not able to resolve. So it's just a big game of Tetris, these high school schedules, and so what we plan to do is figure out where all the conflicts and issues are, list them in priority, and then try to resolve them one by one. I've heard Dr. Brown say this several times, but everything's on the table in terms of resolving these conflicts so that we can get to a point where we feel comfortable and we feel like we've done our best to resolve those conflicts.
And the rules and the guidance that you gave at the beginning of the year regarding colds and when you come to school and when you stay home, those all still apply, right, in this scenario?
Yeah, I might, either Jen or Jay may speak better to that in terms of a reopening plan. Either one of you can take that.
With relationship to health, student health?
Yes.
So we still push our daily wellness check for students and staff. We've walked through a process with our health services team to problem solve the heavy hitters with colds, flu, two strands of flu, and the coronavirus, what the differences are. And our plan does allow for students to return without a COVID test if the doctor says, yeah, it's something else. But that's a part of that whole consultation with the health room in each building. We don't want anybody coming to work sick. We don't want anybody coming to school sick.
So how does that sick child, when they're well, get back into school? Is there a doctor's note required?
So our plan allows for a couple of different entry points. One is resolution of symptoms. This is a really difficult time right now. Flu season is really difficult, allergy season is really difficult because those symptomologies are kind of the same. So it can be resolved by a history of allergies and now you're over it. It can be resolved by a doctor making a phone call, a doctor writing a note, a positive test, or if the student is not under a quarantine situation, a negative test. So there are a lot of different entry points. I think our letter is so broad as to say consultation with me, even. So it's really just about problem solving. We don't want to put gates for our families. We want to put speed bumps so that we know what we're dealing with and we have time for families to have symptoms resolved. Kids are going to get sick because they get sick. We just really want to look at the virus piece and how we can kind of contain that to the best of our ability. But all of those things are still in play. When someone's quarantined, when we ask someone to quarantine, part of what they get from us, from me, is a list of symptoms that are a well check.
And I didn't mean to ask a particular question or instance or symptom. My point was that the rules we had at the beginning and the procedures, they still apply.
They completely apply. And I would say they apply at almost a higher level because the risk is a little bit higher because you have more people in the environment.
So based on the schedule, if we approve tonight, then you immediately start the E-forms, and then you'll also start planning on all the questions that Leona had on the stuff. But then also, that gives you about 4 weeks, looks like, to plan for the teachers, and if you get, how many students you get in, so you've got about 4 weeks for staffing. So you've got a 6-week period to plan for this event. And I understand we had to get out there. You got to have a start date sometime, and so.
Yeah,
6 weeks is pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think every staff member in this audience is, at this point in the school year, exhausted with the hours that we're putting in. And if we could have 10 weeks, maybe that's better. But yeah, we try to balance what we believe our community wants, desires, and what our health department is suggesting we can do safely with the logistical consideration. So while it may be viewed as not less than ideal by some, and we understand that, we feel like it's a reasonable timeline.
Yep, I think I see, you've got to have, you got middle school, you got high school, so you got two different, basically two different schools that are starting. So you've got to have a plan for one, and then a plan, you have to have time to plan for the other. So you can't just do them both at the same time. So there's no way.
Yeah, I think it would be a misstep for us to bring everybody back all at one time. I think, our middle school numbers are significantly lower in our buildings compared to our high school, and it gives us, a period of time where we can learn from what we're experiencing, just as we have with elementary school students to this point, and then we can hopefully apply what we learn to our implementation at the high school level. Because, we did have plans to start the school year, and in large part, those plans really haven't changed. But, as we implement these plans, there are some things that kind of rear their head that are different than anything that we considered, and we have to make those modifications on the fly. So, by phasing this plan, we can learn maybe some of those modifications before we bring the next layer back.
Right. And I think 6 weeks is a good planning period. That's a good time.
This is asking you to make a guess, but do you have any inkling about how many roughly will choose all virtual because of this change?
I don't have any idea. I mean, my gut tells me that we could have the same number choose to go virtual from our hybrid as our students from our virtual choose to go back to full in person. And I'm saying that because I know we have some students that are struggling in full virtual. And I think, Mike, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we're seeing more of that at the high school level. It would be a guess, and that's why we're doing the declaration period. But obviously, we're concerned about our numbers in our online participation. We're also concerned about the number of students that we have in each classroom as we move to full in person. So, we'll just have to see what we get and then try to resolve those conflicts to the best of our ability.
I would just say, Mike, just to be very transparent with the board, because I look at this as what's going to come to you from the community when this happens. And I would think one thing to kind of wrap your head around, and to let you know that this will happen, is we will have children, and this doesn't happen very often in the school year, that second semester or earlier will have a different teacher. And that could be a big deal for a child and for a family. And that could even happen elementary. So as numbers change for elementary in January, let's just say we get some remote kids that decide to go back to in person, and then we have to hire maybe a teacher or take a remote teacher and put them into the elementary setting. Those classes will have to be dispersed again a little bit, so that there's going to be movement of children in this. Make no mistake about it. We have classes at the high school and middle school that have high numbers on the AB together. Those kids have to go somewhere. So they may have to go to another teacher. That can be a big deal for a family. And so I want you guys to know that that may happen so that you're not surprised by that.
Thank you.
I guess my main concern is I'm hoping that the 200 and some kids that this one online teacher is dealing with is not the norm. I'm hoping that that is a one-off and maybe we can get her some help.
How many, is that standard?
That's a lot of kids.
Dr. Gardner, do you or Duff or Dr. Wilson or Dr. Duff, if you want to speak to this, or Dr. Brown?
We can all speak to it. That is a lot. So this is our first go around with remote learning. We've never had a remote school before. So Dr. Gardner is well versed in the standard class sizes for in person on a normal year. But for remote learning, DESE doesn't put out standard class sizes. So if you go to Liberty, Alicia was telling me this today, it is different in every district. You know, Liberty has very high class sizes in the remote. Green Valley has lower than Liberty. Green Valley is more like us. And so we're trying to calibrate what is the number. We're not sure. And I was on a call with some of the middle school teachers who graciously gave their time to me and gave me some feedback, you know, on what they're experiencing. And I hear them. I hear them. And I told them let's give it to the first quarter and kind of see, let's let it calibrate out a bit. And then after that, Rob and I need to work with them to try to make sure that we get them the help that they need. But we're all trying to figure out what that number is. And I wish I knew. I've never done this before. But we will, and Rob and I will work with them to make sure that everybody's okay.
So we are open to hiring more, I mean,
Everything's on the table. Everything's on the table. You want to say anything?
Again, as Dr. Brown alluded to, we had to create something that doesn't exist. So the elective offerings, for example, of middle school, we know what we would offer them. But in a remote setting, we couldn't offer all of those electives. Band, for example, we have to take it off the table. So we had to design something for 6, 7, and 8, and then talk to our building admins about how many people are we going to take and remove out of your building that reduces your in-person opportunities and scheduling. We have one project lead the way person at Berry and one at Flat City Mill. If we take it and remove it, we remove it from all students, period. So we're doing what we think is best for kids. In our middle school format, we had one ELA, Miss McCartney. We had one science. We had one social studies. We had one, you know, and then we started thinking about what electives to create. But we can't take one band teacher and one art teacher and then one project lead the way teacher. The schedules will not operate that way. And Leon was gracious enough to kind of play a catch-up. We need somebody to help us integrate our new learners as we get new kids in and out every day. It takes a long time to get them up and running and to ensure their success. So we're the old adage, we're building the plane as we're flying. So we're going to figure this out, but we need to get our numbers through this declaration period so that'll allow us to kind of see if we have to recruit teachers. Are we going to put teachers back in the building, or do we need to pull some more out? And we don't have those answers yet, but we're going to figure them out. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Oh, I was just going to say, remember my caution about fund balances. While I think the budget looks good, we're spending a lot of money on COVID-related things and not getting as much revenue to offset that as I would like to see. But you know, these people in the front row can tell you I've said yes to more things this year than I ever have. And there's some things that we cannot resolve without spending money. So I just, you know, offer that caution as well.
If you go by the survey that we've taken one before the summer and one at the end of summer, that should give you a basis on what kind of numbers you're going to have that students are going to come back the second semester. Wouldn't you think?
I think we can take some.
Because I'm telling you, there's a lot of parents are ready to get their kids back to school, because if you go on the online right now, your total cases since school started is 18 out of 5,004 that's in the staffing and students.
Yeah,
I think parents and students are ready to come back to school, and I think a lot of the remote learning will decrease. I mean, that's only common sense. But I think there's going to be a high number of, when your deadline's November 13th, I think there's going to be a lot of kids ready to come back to school.
Well, we're going to ask them so we can be sure. You know, we could do a side bet on what's going to happen, but you know, we need to ask them. I have my predictions as well. I think we can take some, maybe, there would be some ability to predict based on the second survey that we did, but still, we still have to ask them. I know we have some of our online learners that I think are still fearful of being back in person, but they are struggling with that format so much that it would be different than what they would have, voted for on that last survey. So we don't know for sure, but we'll know here after we do our declaration period. And yeah, we're hearing from families that want to be back in person. We're also hearing from folks that appreciate the virtual option and that also have worked well in the hybrid. So we'll find out what they want to do, and then we're going to make our adjustments accordingly, including resolving some of the difficult logistical conflicts that we're going to have to address.
Well, and I think a lot of the concern about going full is increasing the amount of times that students are then quarantining and staff. And so are there any conversations, and what do those look like about easing that transition in and out? I mean, obviously we're learning as we go about what is best. Any plans to change anything to help that?
To clarify, are you asking about easing transition in and out of quarantine?
Yes.
Okay, so there are two different ways that quarantine can occur. One is someone shares that they've been exposed outside of our setting, and it's been recommended that they quarantine. That is kind of the one-off or small group piece, right? We also have quarantines that we recommend based on exposures that have happened within our settings. It's much easier for us to set criteria on the must-dos for teachers with regard to those because they tend to happen more in bulk. We're still refining, Dr. Wilson and I think we talk about this 3 or 4 times a day, exactly what parameters we want to put in place for those sorts of experiences. The younger the student is, the more difficult it is for them to access their learning through our platforms. The older the student is, the more fluent they already are in doing that because that's part of how their systems work. So it's kind of a moving target there. I'll also add to that laying on top of that is what interventions was that child receiving, special education, English language services, all those sorts of things need to sit on top of that as well. So logistically, I would say there is an ease into it because we just can't be as agile. It's not a push of a button. But we are working with our teachers and solidifying some of those basic must-do pieces. The older they are, the easier it is.
And if a staff member has to quarantine, can someone address their pay, their leave, how that works?
Hello. Oh boy. Hello.
You killed me.
There we go. Yeah, if we have to have a staff member that has to quarantine, essentially what we do is we determine whether or not they want to use what we refer to as the FFCRA leave. That essentially entitles them to 10 days, 2 weeks, however you want to look at that, at full pay, and it doesn't deduct from your, what we call annual leave days, your paid time off, PTO, whatever designation you want to use. After that, which we've had no staff member use up all of that time and then still have to be off. So we track that in HR, every single person. I think it's 26 people to date that we have quarantined, I believe, off the top of my head, for a period that could be 10 days, but as Dr. Butel already said, sometimes it's 5 days, sometimes it's 3 days, depending on what we're doing and if they're exposed or if it's a positive or whatever the case may be. So when we get into a second quarantine, what are our options? Well, we have options under board policy for paid admin leave that we can utilize. We have also approved staff members to work from home, and we in HR require them to have like a work log. If they're classified, they time in and we can track their work that way. And if they have accumulated leave, again, they can pull down that leave. Let's just say they have 50 days. They can utilize that so that they still receive full pay. So we have a lot of options. I believe when we went to our buildings on Monday, I believe it was the middle school, somebody had asked that very question, and we spent some time answering that. But HR takes that on a case-by-case basis. Bus driver, for example, could not work from home. So that's a different discussion and a different option than we might have for, let's just say, a teacher that maybe we could figure out how to do this remotely. How could we make this work? What's the term that we're looking at? Is it 4 days or is it 10? So we have a lot of options on the table to answer the question.
I think while it would be comforting to everybody for us to have an easy answer that no one will ever be affected by this, what I can tell you is that while we're dealing with some very unique things, it would not be our intent. I think the board would agree with us that it would not be our intent to hold our staff members financially accountable for COVID-related quarantines if we have any earthly possible ability to work on that. And so, in good faith, we will take it on a case-by-case situation and make the right decision as good employers.
And could we as a board request that if that does happen, we're notified?
If someone is docked and paid,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah. We can put it in the monthly personnel meeting section, closed section. I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
It is good to note that when most of those exposures happen that are quarantine related, our testing systems that are currently set up are not agile enough to, there's a delay for most folks between when their symptoms onset and when they get tested, and when they get tested and when they get the results. So the potential to eat up the 10 days is actually really more of an issue if someone is a positive.
I'm certain I know we have teachers who are anxious to go back full-time, and teachers also who would like to stay in the hybrid for their own protection and for what's best for kids. Any idea what that percentage is or how that plays out?
To give you any kind of percentage, it would be a guess. Going back to what I said earlier, it's been our intent since the beginning of considering our reopening plans in the fall to get back to full in person as long as the health department can allow us to do that. I think we can agree that all of us have a differing opinion on what we should do and when we should do it. And I think our teaching staff, there would be a variety of opinions offered. But what we've asked our teachers to do is to work with us on our decisions that we have to make sometimes relatively quickly, but then help us do the best job that we can do to implement our plans. And we need their input and feedback to be able to do that. And so, I'll just tell you, based on the 3 meetings I went to, we definitely have some people that aren't loving this plan. But we had a lot of people sit silently and listen. I did see some people that looked relieved with the plan. So it's probably all over the board. And what we're asking staff members to do is to support this plan and help us make this and implement this plan in the safest possible way. And we need to work with them to do that.
I would think it would be as varied as the needs of the children that we serve, and teachers know that best.
I would guess you're right.
In the middle school, they have roughly, I think, 1 week, is that correct, to make this decision. When will this be communicated, and how will this be communicated? Tomorrow morning, or?
We will include a summary of the board action and the presentation tonight in tomorrow's eTreasures newsletter, alluding to the schedule.
Thank you.
We will include a summary of tonight's presentation and board action in tomorrow's e-treasures. If this is approved by the board, then we will also send a direct message to all middle school in-person families, linking parent portal where the e-form will be located. We have a little blurb to go ahead of that that explains the process and the risks, and that if we do not hear back from them by October 23rd, we will assume that their full in-person selection at the start of the school year remains the same. Then we will follow later with another communication to all families about the second semester declaration.
And assuming we have any idea what this will be right now, will it have details about what the distancing looks like, what the building specifics look like to help make those decisions for those families?
I would direct parents back to our original school reopening plan. We're going to strive to have as much distancing as possible, but until we know the numbers that will be back in each classroom and do those shifts of classrooms and schedules as necessary, we may not be able to give that complete, accurate picture.
Yes, and I'll add to what Laura said. Well, before we started this school year, we did a building and a classroom audit of all of our spaces to determine the layouts, modified settings, trying to identify ways we can get the most spacing possible. We recognize that one of the things that's going to be challenging is social distancing when we bring back more students. And so we're going to do that to the greatest extent possible. We're also going to be implementing a series of mitigation strategies that we are doing currently, and that others that we're going to be doing in a more comprehensive, robust way. Indoor air quality, in some cases plexiglass. Making sure we identify larger spaces in our buildings and maybe moving classrooms around. There's a variety of things we're doing. We'll continue to do those audits and find ways, but we know that the social distancing is going to be very difficult. And we should be very honest that quarantine and isolation measures is an important part of our mitigation strategies. And it allows us to remain open and to continue to provide opportunities for kids. And so there's a good likelihood those will go up the more people we have in our buildings. And we know that's a reality. But I will tell you that with K-5 currently being full in person with the virtual option, and our hybrid approach, we've maintained over a 90% attendance currently in all of our buildings district-wide. So even though there's risk of more quarantines, there's risk of making sure that on occasion we may be asking people to stay home. We also have been successful with a lot of kids being able to be in school, be in person, and do well. So that's all part of our process, and we'll continue to build on that as we move forward into this new transition.
And I assume the distancing and striving to do as best we can applies to every part of the day, not just the classrooms. But
yeah, absolutely. Cafeterias, before school, after school. I mean, everywhere that we can, trying to identify the ways that we can get the best spacing possible. One-way traffic in our buildings, just a lot of things that we're doing to try to minimize cross exposures and maintain stable seating charts and stable cohorts of students. Those are all part of our strategy as well.
Do you know where the biggest, threat of not being able to maintain that is?
I'm sorry?
What is the biggest threat of not being able to maintain a distance? Or
in
where
terms
is,
of location of building?
Yeah, where is the
activity?
lunch lines, buses?
Yes, I mean, I think transportation, certainly, it's just not feasible to get 6 feet between every student on a school bus. We do require face covering. That's one of our important part of our mitigation strategies. Lunchrooms, cafeterias. Our elementary schools have half our students eating in the classroom, half in the cafeteria. We haven't had to do that at the secondary level, but we may have to consider something, or other spaces. Using a variety of areas in the building. There's a number of things that we'll have to look at, and all of our reopening plans are on our website, and they're stated in a very general way. But then each building has a more building-specific plan that addresses how they're gonna do it in their building. And that's what we're gonna start making some changes on as we do these audits of the building and classroom, thinking about bringing more students back.
I'm assuming now, with the bus schedule we have now, we can kind of get some idea of how many kids are riding the bus every other day. So we've got a pretty good idea of how many kids will be on the bus, and even some kids may be car riders now, or because their parents are homeschool, they're home working also, so.
Yeah, we scheduled our transportation routes as if every student was gonna be taking advantage of the bus like they have in the past. And all we changed was the number of stops on that route. So as we add kids to the routes, we'll just be adding stops. There might be an occasion we have to add a route, if that bus route gets too long,
Right.
but we'll have that planned out.
You can't get the numbers now, really.
Yeah. And this declaration period will give us a lot of information so we know what we're planning on.
Part of that declaration e-form will
We will ask about transportation again with the new declaration.
Right.
How difficult will it be to merge the A and B groups with the middle school, since that is coming pretty quickly? Will it be the same schedule?
I would expect there to be some changes to the master schedule. I mean, to say how difficult, I don't know that I could tell you. It's going to be logistically difficult, but not as difficult as the high school.
Right.
So you want to speak to that
Yeah,
further?
just to give you some ideas, because Andy and I went through some preliminary numbers today. We have science and social studies at PCMS is going to be an issue. We have 10, I think it was social studies, don't quote me on this, it's either social studies or science, 10 classes that are 29 plus on, and what I mean by that is, that could be 14, 15, right, because it's AB, but that's too much. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll look at where our trouble spots are after we get the declaration number, and we'll reset that. We already know that there's trouble in those classes already. So then what we'll do is we'll try to fix those now, and then when we get the declaration, we'll be a little further ahead. So we're buying ourselves some time by starting this week. So on Tuesday, we'll go over those numbers, we'll start. Then Thursday, the declarations will start coming in, and we'll just kind of continue on and find our hot spots. And we're gonna start on the high school as soon as we get the middle school done, because the high school is gonna be even more challenging. So we kind of already know where our trouble spots are.
And, I'll throw this out to demonstrate that everything's on the table. I believe I might have the content area wrong, but I think we have a social studies student teacher that is finishing his student teaching experience, and some colleges are giving a little bit of latitude around putting them actually in a substitute position to complete their student teaching. And that is an example of us being creative to try to mitigate those numbers a little bit. So that may have kind of lend itself to helping us in terms of finding staff.
And this is something that I think a couple of us have been approached about, but does this have any impact on large events? Attendance at large events, and why or why not? And why are those decisions made anyway, separate of this?
You bet. I'll leave that to Dr. Harris.
So if we're talking about anything related to athletics or extracurricular activities, we work closely with the Suburban Conference to identify a consistent approach that maintains what Suburban Conference, in working with their local health departments, because we have a variety of counties that we're working with on a Suburban Conference, on what the appropriate capacities at different events could be. So we'll do that. We're getting ready to do that with our winter sports. We did that for the fall sports. We're also now starting to talk about band concerts, choir concerts, and how do you do those safely. Looking at a facility like this, we can spread out, wear face coverings and still have quite a few people here. And so we're having that dialogue now. We'll continue to work closely with the Suburban Conference so we have a consistent and comprehensive approach to that answer.
Yeah, so just to elaborate on that, we are looking at all of our venues And while we know that we don't have a gathering restriction in Platte County, we know that we have some restricted ability in all of our venues to social distance, which is still a requirement that the health department is recommending. So for example, when we're looking at our football stadium, we're planning for about 1,000 total attendees, and that's probably, if we plan for 1,000, we're probably not going to get 1,000 on game day. But basically, that's getting us somewhere around that 25 to 30% occupancy, and that's what's allowing us to social distance. And so that hasn't changed, and so we will continue to look at the Suburban Conference guidance, and as I think I mentioned earlier, the Suburban Conference is working on winter sports currently, and they'll give us some guidance for that, both in terms of our participation, but also in terms of the requirements for the spectators and limitations there. But we'll also be working with the health department as we continue to comply with their recommendations. So really, it can be confusing, I think, for parents sometimes because there is no county restriction on gatherings, but there still is the 6-foot social distancing requirement. And obviously, when we have these larger events, we've got people in the stands that have compromised immunity and so forth, and so we want to make sure that we're being mindful of that. And that's the reason and rationale for the restrictions. And I don't know when that will change, quite frankly. We'll continue to talk with our health department and collaborate with them, but I don't really have a good feel for when that might change from the health department.
Yeah, and as Dr. Rack mentioned, we're seeing about 25 to 30% capacity being what we can do while maintaining our social distancing expectations.
And does anyone know offhand, are there any other schools in the metro area, comparable schools who have gone back full-time or started full-time, middle school and high school? And how has that gone?
Yeah, so a couple of schools that we've been using as case studies are Harrisonville and Blue Springs. Both of those districts have, well, actually, Blue Springs has been full in-person K through 12 since September 8th, and Harrisonville has been full in-person since I think their original school start day, which was late August. And so we've been monitoring their data. Proportionally, it's comparable to our data. And so I talk with the superintendent in Blue Springs about every other day. He's just in a collaboration group that I've been a part of since we started down this road in March. And so, all indications from him are, while they're dealing with challenges and quarantines and that sort of thing, they're moving right along, so without any significant issue. I know several districts that are contemplating making this move at semester as well, so I continue to collaborate with other districts as they consider changing their learning modalities, and I suspect that there will be some interest from other districts once this plan, if it is approved tonight. I think it will be of interest to other districts as they consider their change in learning modalities.
This presentation, or the plan that you're presenting to the health department, will it be the same for all 4 Platte County school districts?
No, they're not really requiring anything specific. They just want to know what our mitigation strategies are. So what our plans are to submit our existing reopening plans, also to submit this presentation, to directly address our mitigation strategies in the body of the email. And I also, I'm kind of talking on the fly here, but Mary Jo just sent a document with us that's kind of a rubric to assess our mitigation strategies that we may want to take a look at and talk about incorporating into the submission as well. So it's not like a required form or anything like that.
So the reopening dates are not consistent among the 4 districts?
No, and obviously all 4 districts are dealing with different circumstances in terms of their facility and population, but we're also experiencing different numbers. And again, I want to caution, looking at the positivity rates and number of cases can be somewhat limiting because of the testing protocols in the county, but we're seeing more, the numbers are higher in South Platte County. And so this may be a completely different consideration for Park Hill and their school board. But I know all of us are talking about some sort of a return second semester, and there may be others that mirror what we do if we, in fact, make this decision tonight.
Any other questions or discussion? It is recommended the Board of Education approve the submission of mitigation strategies and reopening plan of the Platte County R3 School District to the Platte County Health Department as detailed in the presentation plans submitted herein. Is there a motion to recommend or approve?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. Motion carried. Legislative update.
I don't think I have a legislative update. You'll be happy to hear. Not much going on yet.
Important dates. Wednesday, October 21st, PLC day, 2-hour early dismissal. Friday, October 23rd is the end of first quarter. Wednesday, November 4 and Thursday, November 5, parent-teacher conferences. No school. Friday, November 6th. Wednesday, November 11th, PLC day. November Board of Education meeting, Thursday, November 19th at 6:30, reconvene from closed session, which begins at approximately 5:30. Thanksgiving break, no school, Wednesday, November 25th through Friday, November 27th. December Board of Education meeting, and will be held at the District Education Center on Thursday, December 17th at 6:30, reconvene from closed session at 5:30. PLC day, Wednesday, December 9th, first day of board candidate filing, Tuesday, December 22nd, beginning at 8 a.m. at the District Education Center. Winter break, no school, Wednesday, December 23rd through Friday, January 1st. Classes resume Monday, January 4th. Last day of board candidate filing, Tuesday, January 19th, ending at 5:00 p.m. at the District Education Center. Comments by board members and administration. I'll kick it off. I think it goes without saying, and we've said it since March, everyone is doing a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate it. I think our parents appreciate it. I know you're doing a lot that we don't see, but we do see that you're putting a lot of heart and soul into it, and we do appreciate it.
I'll reiterate that. Yeah, I was going to say, we've been saying on every meeting, it seems like, but the administration, teachers have done a tremendous job with all this. You know, most of us have students in school, and we see the hybrid schedule and the work that's being done by the teachers to help those kids and the ones that are in person. So just thank you, huge thank you to all the teachers that are working hard to do this, and administration also.
Thank you for the work that went into the very detailed opening plan, the hybrid plan, the off-site plan, and finally the reopening plan. And just as you implied, without perfect knowledge, it's going to be hard to create a perfect universal plan that fits for everyone, that's guaranteed to work. So I thank you in advance for the flexibility that I'm sure you will demonstrate as the conditions change. I'm sure our plan will change to accommodate them.
Jen, it helped me to know that you have such a good hold on the tracing and are managing that, within the buildings, because that helps a lot.
I also want to say, I know a lot of us have heard more from the community these past few months than probably ever before in our terms, but I encourage you to keep asking questions, keep seeking to understand, ask who to talk to about a certain item, but keep seeking the information and sharing your opinion kindly.
I was just going to say, first of all, thank you to the Board of Education for giving us grace. And when I say us, I'm talking about from your superintendent down to our district and building administration and our classroom teachers. We appreciate the grace that you're giving us and understanding as we deal with the challenges that we face. Um, I also want to say that we love our teachers, we love our students, and we care very deeply about all of those folks and our parents as well. To say that the decisions that we've had to make collectively have been difficult would be a gross understatement. But what continues to motivate me and inspire me is seeing the resilience that our community has, our teachers, our administration, our students. I'm so proud of how resilient our students have been, especially our elementary students. With evolving in an ever-changing situation to doing some things that would probably seem absolutely foreign to them, they have changed and they have allowed themselves to evolve. And I think even though it's not the perfect picture of an elementary school experience, they're learning that there is no such thing as perfect. And so I'm just tremendously proud to be a part of this resilient and pirate strong community. And I didn't want this opportunity to pass without saying that. And then lastly, I would say we probably ought to end every board meeting this way, but these are our plans today. And I think if we've learned anything from the pandemic, that this is a fluid situation and we have to be ready to pivot one direction or the other. And while I think we would all love to have a plan laid out that we know will be implemented exactly as it's laid out, that's not realistic. So I just want to caution everybody that plans may change in accordance with new information that we receive. And then one last thing, I just want you to be aware of this. You might see this in the media. The state is providing every district with these antigen COVID tests, which are rapid. They're like 15-minute return on results. There are way more questions around these tests and what we do with them than there are answers, but you may see this in the media. Dr. Vittel participated in a webinar this past week and has also been meeting with our nursing staff with regard to how we may or may not use these tests. But I just wanted you to be aware that we are working on that. And I don't have a lot of additional information to share with you on these tests. As I said, there's more questions than answers as to how useful they may be or may not be for us. That's all.
Anyone else? All right, I think that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote. We are adjourned.
Make sure you guys do your civic duty and vote.